I think our average congregant out there has a paper-thin level understanding of how we got the Bible. They believe the Bible and they trust it. To their credit, they trust it, but it only takes one person to poke a hole through that thin sheet of paper very quickly and say, well, what about this? And they have no answers. And I think as ministers and as Christian leaders, our job is to sort of inoculate our congregations against those things. And so we have to talk about textual criticism, we have to talk about canon in some way so that they can hear it from us rather than hearing it from Bart Ehrman. And I'd rather us be the one that explains it to them so they don't have sort of a naive, sort of overly simplistic view of the way the Bible came, and then when they hear about textual variants, they don't go into a panic.
Right.
And I think this is one of the places there's been a little bit of a failing in the evangelical church. I think, we've not really explained to people where the Bible comes from, and as a result, they're very vulnerable. I think one of the good examples of this was the whole Da Vinci Code thing that happened in 2006? I can't keep these dates straight. 2005, 2006. Some of you probably remember that, where the Da Vinci Code book came out, and it was like a tsunami hit the church in panic. And I was amazed. I was like, how is it possible that a fictional book that's scholastically messed up, has no real academic credibility, is causing this kind of trouble in the church? And the only conclusion is that we weren't preparing our people well. I think the Da Vinci Code, what was embarrassing about it wasn't how bad the Da Vinci Code was, although it was really bad. What was a little bit embarrassing was just how unprepared Christians were. And I'm thinking to ourselves, we've got to do better than that. I think part of the reason for this session, part of the reason for what we're talking about here is we want to encourage all of you out there that, let's do better as a church informing our people about these things in appropriate ways so they're not unprepared when these challenges come.
Well, especially when our modern translations all have these little notes right there in the margin, and it's almost like we're afraid of them. It's almost like you cover them up. I don't want to see that. There's another one. I don't want to see that. We need to look at that, recognize they're there, recognize what the background is. So in the last couple of minutes we have here, I want to just reiterate what I think is the most important aspect that people need to understand when we talk about the canon of Scripture, is that you must understand the relationship. It's a theological concept, and you must understand the relationship between canon and inspiration, because it is something that comes from God. As I've described it, it is an artifact of revelation. It comes into existence naturally because God has supernaturally revealed these books of Scripture. But since not every book man has ever written is Scripture, there is of necessity a canon, a limitation. And the issue for us is to recognize that is absolutely perfectly known to God. Does God have a reason and a purpose in blessing his people to make sure that we know what he's given to us? I would say that's just as obvious as the fact of revelation itself. And therefore, when we see the process over time, we should not invest the authority of Scripture in the process. That's a natural result of what God is doing. We tend to think, well, Scripture's authority can be no greater than the authority we invest in the historical process, and then you can't come up with inspiration from that. You cannot come up with a high view of Scripture from that. That to me is, I think, if people can grab hold of that, that is the greatest inoculation I can think of.
Yeah, I mean, to put it a different way, don't let your assurance about canon just be sort of data-driven, right? If I can get enough facts, get enough information to convince myself it happened at this time and in this place and this way, therefore I can trust it. Well, it's got to be bigger than that. You've got to have something standing behind it, a theological grid that says God gave these books. Yes, it took time for them to be received. Yes, there was starts and stops, but when the dust settled, we're convinced under God's providence that these are the right books that the church was to have.